शुक्र खुदा में रज़वी हो।
सुबह तक सोना तुझे, दिन लहव में खोना तुझे। शब सुबह तक सोना तुझे, दिन लहव में खोना तुझे। शर्मे नबी खौफ खुदा ये भी नहीं वो भी नहीं। शब सुबह तक सोना तुझे, दिन लहव में खोना तुझे। शर्मे नबी खौफ खुदा ये भी नहीं वो भी नहीं। Allah, by His divine grace and His mercy, has blessed us with every ni'mat that we have. Whatever ni'mat, whatever blessing, whatever bounty you and I have in our lives, it is from the court of Allah. All these ni'mats Allah has given us. The earth on which we walk is a ni'mat. Because if Allah wills, then this earth will split like when an earthquake happens. And instead of being something of benefit, it becomes the cause of destruction. This same Zameen. So this Zameen is Allah's ni'mat. But when man starts to abuse the ni'mat and disrespect that ni'mat, that blessing, that bounty, then he has to face the repercussions. Allah Almighty has given us the rain as a ni'mat. If it does not rain, there will be no crop. If it does not rain, there will be no crop, there will be no kheti, there will be no vegetation. But if Allah wills, then that same rain will become the cause of destruction with floods. And the wind, that sweet breeze that benefits us on a hot day, if Allah wills, it will become a cyclone and uproot our homes as strong as they are. And this is so that we may learn that this is a ni'mat of Allah. And if Allah wills, then He may turn it as He wills. Because Allah is Qadir Mutlaq. Allah is the absolutely all-powerful. Allah is the absolutely all-powerful. Everything is within the divine power of Allah. And when Allah wills, then He will send His blessings unto us. But when we make a na-shukr, when we are ungrateful for that which Allah has bestowed upon us, then we see the damage and the calamity that insan faces. But after all that, man still does not awaken from this deep sleep and slumber. And what is the reason for that? The reason for that is because we have forgotten that death is coming. And I've been discussing this over the last few weeks. It is because we have forgotten that death will come and Qiyamah will come. You have to believe in it, because if you don't believe, then you're not a believer. You're not a Muslim. Okay? But believing and forgetting is also very harmful. We know that it will happen, but we have forgotten. We have not remained conscious that Qiyamah will come. We have not remained conscious that one day Almighty Allah will hold us accountable for all that we have done in this dunya. And we all know that accountability is something that none can escape. You can escape accountability to your business. You can escape accountability to your boss. You can escape accountability to whoever. But you cannot escape accountability in the court of Allah. That is why the day of Qiyamah is known as Yawm Hisab. That is why it is known as Yawm Hisab. The day when we will stand on that zameen that will be burning hot. When the sun will be a span above your heads. When people will be drowning in their own perspiration. On a day when it is equivalent to 50,000 physical years. What will save us on that day? What do we have for that day? Have we asked ourselves? What do we have for that day? Actually, that day is then. What do we have for the first stage when you enter your grave? What do you and I have? What are you going to say? I got so much of namaz. I got so much of roza. I got so much of this and I got so much of that. What guarantee do we have that all of that is Qabul? We have hope of the mercy of Allah, that Allah will accept it, and He has accepted our amal. But what guarantee do you have? You have no guarantee. The only guarantee that we have, and the only true means that we have for our salvation on the day of recognition of Qiyamah, and that day which has been reminded about time and over in the Holy Quran. That day of resurrection, when all will be risen, when all will be on one plane, on one zameen. What do we have for that day? Only and only Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Only and only the beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who is Shafi'i Yawm al-Nushur. He who is the intercessor of the last day. The day when we will be answerable in the court of Almighty Allah. But while we are on this world, in this zameen, what are we doing? How much do we remember our responsibilities and our duties in the court of Allah and His beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How much of shukr do we make in 24 hours? Today people don't even remember to make shukr after they eat. Leave alone making shukr after you eat. How many children and youngsters today will tell you, so say Bismillah? But when they're so lost in the phone, even while they're eating, they can't taste what they eat. So where will they remember to take Allah's name? Where will we remember? How often in a day do you say Alhamdulillah? How often in a day do we thank Allah and make shukr for all the ni'mats that Allah has given us, the sky, the earth, the sun, the moon? Think what happens in those places when the sun never comes out, and for 8 to 10 and 12 hours there is only night. Kya hal hota hai? Think about what would have happened if the sun stayed out all the time at the highest degree. What would have been our hal? How much of shukr do we make? How much of shukr do we make for this great ni'mat that, oh Allah, you have made us the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How much of shukr? We think that when we read our namaz, when we do this and we do that, yes, you must do your fara'id. That's why it's called fard, because it's an obligation. It's ordained. But how many in a day accept that which we have to do? A person starts to think, people when they become drowned in the dunya, they start to think that I'm reading my namaz, I'm keeping my fast, I'm giving my zakat. I fulfilled my duty. मैंने अपना हक अदा कर दिया. What haq? We have fulfilled our duty. We made shukr. We did our salah. Hazrat Sayyidina Hamza bin Abu Umair radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Sayyidina Hamza ibn Abu Umair radiallahu anhu reports from his father. Hazrat Hamza bin Abu Umair radiallahu anhu reports from his father that once Hazrat Sayyiduna Ayyub Kaysan Sakhtiyani, Hazrat Ayyub ibn Kaysan Sakhtiyani radiallahu anhu, who is amongst one of the big tabi'een of Medina. One of the big tabi'een. Who is the tabi'een? One with the eyes of Iman who saw a Sahabi of Rasul Pak sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Got to be in the company of a Sahabi. So he says that Hazrat Sayyiduna Ayyub Sakhtiyani radiallahu anhu was once walking. Who is saying this? Hazrat Sayyidina Hamza bin Abu Umair's father. He says that once Hazrat Ayyub Sakhtiyani radiallahu anhu was walking between me and another person. So we were three people walking. And in the middle was Hazrat Ayyub Sakhtiyani radiallahu anhu. While we were walking, he stopped all of a sudden. While walking, he stopped all of a sudden. And he stopped and he looked at us and he said that people make shukr to Allah. People make shukr, they are grateful to Allah, they thank Allah that He granted them afiyat, that He granted them peace and safety. They make shukr for this. That Allah granted them, He granted us, we make dua, we make shukr, Allah gave us afiyat. Allah granted them peace and He granted them safety, and He has hidden their weaknesses. Allah has hidden our weaknesses, otherwise our gunas will be open. How many things do we do? But our Rabb conceals it. Okay? So, he said, Hazrat Sayyidina Ayyub Sakhtiyani radiallahu anhu said that people make shukr to Allah that He granted them safety and peace, and that He has concealed their weaknesses, their guna, their sins. He has hidden them. Whereas, he said, whereas all our amal, जितने अमल हम करें या जितने अमाल कर चुके, all our amal that we have done, not one, all the things that we have done, all our good deeds cannot be even the return, the badla for one sip of water which Allah gives you when you are in the state of thirst. Allah Akbar. Zara sochne ki baat. All the amal that we do, all the good that we do, cannot be the badala, cannot be the return for the one sip of water which Allah gives you when you are in the state of thirst. Think what happens when you are in a thirsty state and you can't get the sip of water. Kya hal hota hai? After saying this, he said, now where will a man be able to give the badala for all the ni'amats of Almighty Allah? Where will a person be able to give the badla for all the ni'amats of Almighty Allah? We have forgotten that this salah is Allah's great ni'mat. The fact that we get to come into the house of Allah and pick up our hands and say Allahu Akbar, that my Rabb is the greatest. Allah is the greatest. This tawfiq to take Allah's name is a ni'mat. It is a ni'mat that Allah is allowing us to take His name. Allah is giving us the tawfiq to come into His house, into the masjid, and to remember Him. Allah is giving us the tawfiq that when the time of Fajr Salah comes, instead of falling asleep and covering our heads with our blankets, we wake up our beds and we stand in the court of Allah and we say Allahu Akbar. This is Allah's ni'mat. This is Allah's mercy. That when Zohar comes, no matter how big business deal you are doing, you say to the person, wait, it is now time for my salah. How many people do it? Let the salah get qaza. You know why? I'll go and read it. At least I'll make 50,000 today. I'll make 50,000, but at the end of the month you say, I don't know what happens to my money, Maulana. Give me a taweez so I have barakat. First stand in the court of Allah. First stand on the musalla and put your Rabb's ibadat before your wealth. First we need to do that. First we need to do that. Hazrat Sayyidina Yunus bin Ubayd radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Sayyidina, I want you to pay particular attention to these words of this very blessed personality. Hazrat Sayyidina Yunus bin Ubayd radiallahu anhu is also from amongst the great tabi'een of Medina. I spoke about one tabi'een, Hazrat Ayyub Sakhtasani radiallahu anhu and Sakhtiyari radiallahu anhu. And now I'm talking about another tabi'een of Medina Munawwara, Hazrat Sayyidina Yunus bin Ubayd radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He says something very important, and he's saying it out of humility. He's saying it out of humility, inkisari. It's not that he used to do this, but he's speaking to himself, to his nafs. And do you know what he says? Hazrat Sayyidina Yunus bin Ubayd radiallahu anhu, who is a tabi'een of Medina, one day suddenly he said, Achanak, oh, what has happened to me? What did he say? He was in awe. He was in a state of hayrat. He said, oh, what has happened to me? Oh, what has happened to me? When one of my chickens get lost. When one of my, mere murgi gum ho jaye. When one of my chickens get lost, then I run around searching for it. But when my one salah gets lost, I do nothing about it. Allah. सोचने की बात, सोचने की बात है. Hazrat Yunus bin Ubayd's words should be engraved on our hearts. The example of the chicken is just one example. If anything gets lost of a person, you go berserk looking for it. You start frantically searching कि कहाँ गए. 50 रैन गुम हो जाए. 50,000 की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ, 50 की. 50 rand गिर जाए, open the car, search under the seats, go into the house, tell the wife, take out the open the washing machine, look in the kurta, bhai 50 rand is gone. But what about that one salah? What about that one salah which you intentionally missed? And every time that you miss that salah, your name is engraved on the door of Jahannam. It is in the hadith that every time you intentionally miss salah, your name is engraved on the door of Jahannam. We should ask ourselves the question, how many times are our names engraved on the door of Jahannam? One thing we lose in the dunya, one worldly item, and we go frantic, we lose control of ourselves, trying to find that worldly item. But what about that which you lose, regarding which the beloved Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says that it is the closest you will ever come to your Creator Almighty Allah in the Sunnah.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.
What about these things? What about these things? How much of shukr do we make for this ni'mat? Do you know what is the shukr of the ni'mat of salah? To stand in salah.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.
The shukr of the ni'mat of salah is to stand in salah. You can't sit whole day and say, oh Allah, I thank you, you gave me salah, but you don't stand and make your salah. The shukr of that salah is to stand in salah. And you know how to stand? To stand behind the Sunni Sahihul Aqidah. Not behind a Wahhabi. Not behind a Gustakh Rasul. To stand in that salah after making thorough wuzu. And not by while making wuzu busy discussing your business transaction. You don't even know if you washed your hand properly. You don't even know if you washed your face properly. That is the shukr of that salah. That when you stand for salah, you stand knowing that I am standing in the court of Allah. Look at how people stand in the masjid today. I'm being positively critical. If the cap fits you, wear it. How many people stand in the masjid with all the buttons open? Chest showing. Sleeves folded up. Where are you standing? In a boxing ring or in the court of your Rabb? Where are we standing? We are standing in the court of Allah. You walk into a court of the kafir and you go with a coat and your buttons and your sleeve. Why? I'm standing in front of a judge. I'm standing in front of the judge. And when you are standing in front of your Rabb who judges you now and will judge you on the day of Qiyamah, what should be our adab and the lihaz in the court of Allah? Have we forgotten? Have we forgotten that this salah is a great blessing and the shukr is to stand with honor in the court of Almighty Allah with nobility? Allah has given us another great ni'mat. Today I'm talking about ni'mat. Another great ni'mat, and that ni'mat is called mother. What that ni'mat is called? Mother, and the door to that, and that mother is such a ni'mat that under her feet is Jannah. That under her feet is Jannah. But the door to that ni'mat is your father. The door to that ni'mat is your father, don't forget. But that mother is such a ni'mat, is such a blessing. But how many children value that ni'mat? How many children value? How many of us respectfully and honorably speak to our parents? How many of us, when your parents call you, when your mother calls you, you answer with love and adab? Oh, yeah man, wait, I'm coming. Karte ki nahi karte? Think about it. Think about it. On the day of Qiyamah, you will be asked and I will be asked about these ni'mats. We will be asked about these bounties from the court of Almighty Allah. There is one pious servant of Allah. Since today we are talking about these ni'mats, and I spoke about 2 tabi'een from Medina, I will talk about a third one. Another great tabi'een of Medina, Hazrat Sayyidina Muhammad bin Aun radiyallahu anhu. Who? Hazrat Sayyidina Muhammad bin Aun radiyallahu anhu is one of the tabi'een of Medina. It is mentioned that one day, his mother called him to do something. Suniya, very short words, very short discussion, very short narration, but very powerful if you put it in the heart. One day his mother called him to do something. So he responded, because he was a little bit far away from where she was. When she called his name, he answered her, but he was loud. Zor se, unchi awaaz se. He answered her with a loud voice, not out of disrespect. But instead of saying ma, he shouted maybe 2 or 3 times louder than he needed to. So he responded to his mother in a loud voice. When he realized that his voice had gone higher than what he should have, he went immediately and he freed 2 slaves. He freed 2 slaves for raising his voice when answering to his mother. And what about those of you that raise your voice in disrespect to your mother? The ni'mat, the shukr of the ni'mat of a mother is that you should understand that Jannat is under her feet. That is the shukr of that. Is that you should talk to her with love and honor and nobility and respect. Because when they close their eyes, it's too late. When they close their eyes, it's too late. You cannot do anything. Do it now. Do it now. And if any of us here in the masjid whose parents are alive and you disrespect your parents, go first after Salatul Jummah today and ask them for forgiveness. Because if they don't forgive you, the mercy of Allah will not descend on you. And if they have gone from this world, then take out time to go to their graves. Go and ask forgiveness there at their graves. Allah is most merciful, most forgiving. And I have no doubt that even in the rules of your parents who have been hurt by you, when you ask them for forgiveness, then the mother is that even from her qabr she will forgive you. Even then she will forgive you. But we have to remember these are ni'mats. We have to remember these are bounties of Almighty Allah. And we have to understand that if we do not make shukr for these ni'mats, and we spend our days and nights in entertainment of the dunya, without having any fear for Allah and any modesty in the court of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then our akhirat is very dangerous. We're going to face a very destructive hereafter. And I'm going to end today with another important narration. It's a holiday, so we're taking 2-3 minutes more of your time. holiday as in government. Durood Sharif, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Nabiyana Maulana Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Maulana Muhammadin wa ashabihi wa barik sallu alayhi. Salatu wa salamun alayka ya Sayyidi Habibi ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I want to end today with a narration from another Tabi'in of Medina, who said something very beautifully. And if we only pay attention to it, this entire discussion that we have had today will make more sense to us. Hazrat Sayyidina Harun bin Riyab Asadi, Hazrat Sayyidina Harun bin Riyab Al-Asadi radiyallahu ta'ala says that Almighty Allah sent revelation upon a Nabi of a nation. From amongst the many Anbiya Ikram alayhi salatu wasalam that came, to one of the Nabis, Almighty Allah sent wahi, He sent a revelation. What was the message in that revelation? That message is something that we should all pay careful attention to. He says that Almighty Allah sent revelation upon a Nabi, and He said to that Nabi, that say to your people that they have occupied and filled their buildings. Say to your people that they have occupied and filled their mansions, their buildings, but they have kept their hearts empty. Allah Akbar. They have filled and occupied their buildings, but they have kept their hearts empty. Meaning from what? From the remembrance of Allah and from making shukr to Allah and from the thought of the akhirat. They have filled their mansions and their buildings, but they have kept their hearts empty, and they have fattened their nafs. And they have fattened their nafs like you fatten a qurbani animal. They have fattened their nafs like you fatten a qurbani animal. And tell them that when I look towards them, then I do so with my displeasure. I look towards them with displeasure. And when they ask dua from me, then such people I do not accept their dua. I do not accept their dua. And when they ask me for something in the time of need, I do not give it to them. Why? What is the reason for this? Because you do not make shukr in the court of Allah. Think about it. These are very, very strong words. We should think, we should understand that this life is very temporary. Every time that you take a step, when you take and I take one step, make shukr that we can take this step. Think about those that cannot. Every time that you stand and read salah, think about those who have become so ill that they cannot stand in it. When you are able to look with your eyes at the Quran Majid and recite, make shukr. Remember those whose vision Allah has taken away. When you hear Hayya al-Salah and Hayya al-Falah, make shukr. And remember those who cannot even hear this. But sadly there are those who with eyes still cannot see, who with ears still cannot hear, with zubans still can't make Allah shukr. So फिर हमारी क्या हैसियत? What are we here for? This is what you and I need to think about. And this is the message that I want to share with myself. I'm telling this to myself before I tell you. I want to share this message with myself and with you, that how will we be accountable on the day of Qiyamah for all the ni'mats which Allah has given us. And yet we make shikayat and shikwa more than shukr. We complain about every little thing. Imagine if we made as much shukr as much as we complain. Just for food for thought. Just food for thought. The amount of time that we spend complaining about everything. The food got no salt. Why didn't this go straight? Why is it crooked? And then in the end we ask ourselves, when we were in problem, when you got taklif, you ask Allah, oh Allah, why me? And I said this before, why not me? Why not me after the way we live? After all the sins that we are committing? After the nashukri that we are making? So think and remember, and I end with that couplet that I started of Sayyidi Ala Hazrat Adimul Barakat Imam Ahl Sunnat Mujaddid Din wa Millat Parwan Shami Risalat Ashah Imam Ahmad Raza Khan Fazli Bareilly radiyallahu anhu कि शब सुबह तक सोना तुझे दिन लहू में होना तुझे शर्म नबी खौफ खुदा ये भी नहीं वो भी नहीं वमा अलैना इल्ला बलाग में अल्लाह grant shifa to all those that have passed in Ahl Sunnah, Allah exalt them in Jannat al-Na'im.